Stephen Grover Cleveland fell into politics without really trying. In 1881, local businessmen asked Cleveland, then a young lawyer, to run for mayor of Buffalo, New York. He agreed and won the Democratic nomination and the election. As mayor, Cleveland exposed city corruption and earned such a reputation for honesty and hard work that he won the New York gubernatorial race in 1882. Governor Cleveland used his power to take on the Tammany Hall, the political machine based in New York City, even though it had supported him in the election. Within a year, the Democrats were looking to Cleveland as an important new face and pragmatic reformer who might win the presidency in 1884. Grover Cleveland, 1837 to 1908, who served as the 22nd and 24th U.S. president, was known as a political reformer. He is the only president to date who served 2 non-consecutive terms, and also the only Democratic president to win election during the period of Republican domination of the White House that stretched from Abraham Lincoln's 1809 to 65 election in 1860 to the end of William Howard Taft's 1857 to 1930 term in 1913. Cleveland worked as a lawyer and then served as mayor of Buffalo, New York, and governor of New York State before assuming the presidency in 1885. His record in the Oval Office was mixed. Not regarded as an original thinker, Cleveland considered himself a watchdog over Congress rather than an initiator. In his second term, he angered many of his original supporters and seemed overwhelmed by the Panic of 1893 and the Depression that followed. He declined to run for a third term. Stephen Grover Cleveland was born in Caldwell, New Jersey, on March 18, 1837. He was the fifth of 9 children of Richard Foley Cleveland, 1804–53, a Presbyterian minister, and Anne Neal Cleveland, 1806–82. In 1841, the family moved to upstate New York, where Cleveland's father served several congregations before his death in 1853. Did you know? Grover Cleveland vetoed twice as many congressional bills as all 21 of the presidents who preceded him combined for 14 vetoes in his first term. Cleveland left school following his father's death and started working in order to help support his family. Unable to afford a college education, he worked as a teacher in a school for the blind in New York City and then as a clerk in a law firm in Buffalo, New York. After clerking for several years, Cleveland passed the state bar examination in 1859. He started his own law firm in 1862. Cleveland did not fight in the American Civil War, 1861–65, when the Conscription Act was passed in 1863, he paid a Polish immigrant to serve in his place. Cleveland's first political office was Sheriff of Erie County, New York, a position he assumed in 1871. During his 2-year term, he carried out the death sentence, by hanging, of 3 convicted murderers. In 1873, he returned to his law practice. He was persuaded to run for mayor of Buffalo in 1881 as a reformer of a corrupt city government. He won the election and took office in 1882. His reputation as an opponent of machine politics grew so rapidly that he was asked to run as the Democratic candidate for governor of New York. Cleveland became governor in January 1883. He was so opposed to unnecessary government spending that he vetoed 8 bills sent up by the legislature in his first 2 months in office. But while Cleveland was popular with the voters, he made enemies within his own party, particularly the powerful Tammany Hall political machine in New York City. However, he won the respect of New York State Assemblyman and future U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt, 1858–1919, and other reform-minded Republicans. Cleveland was soon regarded as presidential material. First term in the White House, 1885–89. Cleveland won the Democratic presidential nomination in 1884 in spite of the opposition of Tammany Hall. The 1884 presidential campaign was ugly. Cleveland's Republican opponent, U.S. Senator James G. Blaine, 1830–93, of Maine, was implicated in several financial scandals, while Cleveland was involved in a paternity case in which he admitted that he had paid child support in 1874 to a woman who claimed he was the father of her child. In spite of the scandal, Cleveland won the election with the support of the Mugwumps, Republicans who considered Blaine corrupt. Once in office, Cleveland continued the policy of his predecessor, Chester Arthur, 1830–86, in basing political appointments on merit rather than party affiliation. He tried to reduce government spending, using the veto more often than any other president up to that point. Cleveland was a non-interventionist in foreign policy and fought to have protective tariffs lowered. In 1886, Cleveland married Frances Folsom, 1864–1947, a student at Wells College in New York who was 27 years his junior. Although Cleveland was not the first president to marry while in office, he is the only one who had the ceremony in the White House. At age 21, Frances became the youngest First Lady in U.S. history. The Clevelands would go on to have 5 children. The tariff issue came back to haunt Cleveland in the presidential election of 1888. Former U.S. Senator Benjamin Harrison, 1833–1901, of Indiana won the election, in large part because of heavy turnout by voters in the industrial states of the Northeast who saw their jobs threatened by lower tariffs. Cleveland even lost his home state of New York in that election. He returned to New York City and took a position in a law firm for the next 4 years. Second term in the White House, 1893–97. Unlike the campaign of 1884, the presidential campaign of 1892 was quiet and restrained. President Harrison, whose wife, Caroline Harrison, 1832–92, was dying of tuberculosis, did not campaign personally, and Cleveland followed suit. Cleveland won the election, in part because voters had changed their minds about high tariffs and also because Tammany Hall decided to throw its support behind him. Cleveland's second term, however, opened with the worst financial crisis in the country's history. The Panic of 1893 began with a railroad bankruptcy in February 1893, followed rapidly by bank failures, a nationwide credit crisis, a stock market crash and the failures of 3 more railroads. Unemployment rose to 19%, and a series of strikes crippled the coal and transportation industries in 1894. The American economy did not recover until 1896–97, when the Klondike gold rush in the Yukon touched off a decade of rapid growth. Cleveland was inconsistent in his social views. On the one hand, he opposed discrimination against Chinese immigrants in the West. On the other hand, he did not support equality for African Americans or voting rights for women, and he thought Native Americans should assimilate into mainstream society as quickly as possible rather than preserve their own cultures. He also became unpopular with organized labor when he used federal troops to crush the Pullman Railroad strike in 1894. Cleveland was an honest and hard-working president, but he is criticized for being unimaginative and having no overarching vision for American society. Opposed to using legislation to bring about social change, he is best known for strengthening the executive branch of the federal government in relation to Congress. By the fall of 1896, Cleveland had become unpopular with some factions in his own party. Other Democrats, however, wanted him to run for a third term, as there was no term limit for presidents at that time. Cleveland declined, and former U.S. Representative William Jennings Bryan, 1860–1925, of Nebraska won the nomination. Bryan, who later became famous as an opponent of British naturalist Charles Darwin's 1809–82 theory of evolution, lost the 1896 election to Governor William McKinley, 1843–1901, of Ohio. After leaving the White House in 1897, Cleveland retired to his home in Princeton, New Jersey, and served as a trustee of Princeton University from 1901 until his death. He refused overtures from his party to run again for the presidency in 1904. His health began to fail rapidly at the end of 1907 and he died of a heart attack at the age of 71 on June 24, 1908. According to two of Cleveland's biographers, his last words were, "I have tried so hard to do right." In 1871, Cleveland held his first public office as sheriff for a 2-year term but returned to his law offices as soon as it ended. In 1881, he campaigned for the office of Buffalo mayor, won, and took office in 1882. He was an extremely popular mayor and encouraged to run for governor. He became governor of New York in January of 1883. His stance on reducing government spending created both political enemies and political allies, the most important of these being then President Theodore Roosevelt. His popularity grew, and he decided to run for president. Grover Cleveland became the 22nd President of the U.S. on March 4, 1885. He was the first Democrat elected after the Civil War and the first to have his marriage ceremony at the White House. During his term, he vetoed more bills than any other president before him. These vetoes included, providing seed to farmers suffering from drought, fraudulent private pensions for alleged Civil War veterans, and pensions for disabilities not caused by military service. He forced railroad companies to return large tracts of land that had previously been granted to them by the government and signed the Interstate Commerce Act in an attempt to federally regulate railroads. Cleveland did everything in his power to reduce government spending. His move to reduce protective tariffs resulted in low approval ratings. In 1888, he was defeated by Benjamin Harris in his second presidential campaign. Not to be discouraged, he waited another 4 years and ran again. Grover Cleveland became the 24th President of the U.S. on March 4, 1893, and is the only president to have 2 non-consecutive terms. The beginning of the new term was marked by an economic crisis when railroad companies went bankrupt, followed by banks, a stock market crash, a credit crisis, high unemployment, and coal mining strikes. The gold rush of 1896 pulled the economy out of destitution. Though he was a dedicated president and firm in his beliefs, the policies of his second term lost the support of his party. Though Cleveland is not considered one of the greatest presidents to serve the nation, he has achieved other honors. His summer retreat farmland has since been developed into a suburban residential area known as Cleveland Park, where he and his family are portrayed on murals in the neighborhood. Grover served on the first board of directors of Buffalo Normal School, which today is the Buffalo State College. Administrative sections of this institution are hosted at the Grover Cleveland Hall, named in his honor. He and his family were heavily involved with Princeton University and even purchased a retirement home nearby. During his retirement, Cleveland served as a trustee for the university. Grover Cleveland will be most remembered for his resolute commitment to refusing special privileges for individuals and economic groups. Grover Cleveland stands alone in American history as the only president to serve non-consecutive terms. On the anniversary of his birth, here's a look at one of most fascinating White House occupants. On March 18, 1837, the future president was born in Caldwell, NJ. Cleveland passed away in Princeton, NJ, at the age of 71. He had been out of politics after an unsuccessful run at the Democratic presidential nomination in 1896. Officially, Cleveland is known as the 22nd president and the 24th president, after his wins in the 1884 and 1892 general elections. But he lost the 1888 to his Republican foe, Benjamin Harrison. Here is a look at the very interesting and unique political career of the only double president. 1. Cleveland's real first name was Stephen, not Grover. He used his middle name of Grover as an adult. Maybe he tired of using the name Stephen Cleveland in grade school? 2. Yes, he's a distant relative of the guy they named the city of Cleveland after. But Grover didn't grow up in Ohio. He was born in New Jersey and later moved to New York State. 3. Cleveland was a big guy. He wasn't called Big Steve, as one of his political nicknames, for nothing. At 275 pounds, he was the second heaviest president after William Howard Taft. Fitness magazine named him as the least healthiest president, because of his penchant for beer drinking and cigar smoking. For his first career was as a teacher. Cleveland was a teacher at the New York Institute for the Blind in Manhattan before deciding to pursue a legal career. 5. Cleveland ran for office in Buffalo and New York State as a reformer. He gained quite a reputation as a fresh-faced politician who fought corruption and patronage. In 1882, he became Buffalo's mayor, and in 1883 he became New York's governor. 6. What's the deal with the alleged illegitimate kid? Republicans accused him of fathering an illegitimate child in 1874. Cleveland admitted it was possible, but his law partner, Oscar Folsom, may have also been the father. Cleveland's honesty helped to blunt the scandal's impact. 7. Cleveland won the first presidential election by the narrowest of margins. It was a win by just 1,200 votes in his adopted home state of New York that swung the 1,884 election. 8. Cleveland actually won his second election in the popular vote. Big spending by the Republicans swung the electoral vote in New York State away from Cleveland, and Benjamin Harrison took the Electoral College vote, and the presidency. 9. A third party helped Cleveland get his second term. The Populist Party took 8% of the popular vote, and Cleveland easily defeated Harrison in the 1,892 rematch, by a 277 to 145 margin in the Electoral College. 10. Cleveland gets mixed grades as a president. Historians rank Cleveland as an average president at best, in the same category as Chester Alan Arthur and Benjamin Harrison. Cleveland gets credit for restoring the power of the presidency in the 1880s, but Cleveland's misunderstandings about political systems and an economic depression in 1893 saw Cleveland's Democrats lose power quickly and his political career end. Thank you for watching this video.